Good afternoon, students. This is Chef Jeannie and Chef Genevieve for Bk201-1910, and we are in week 2. So congratulations on getting through week 1. We're going to talk about your JAM assignment in just a second. But this week, I am going to not talk too much. Chef Genevieve is going to take over speaking on farm to table. And I'll also chime in on some carbon footprint and greenhouse gas type of things at the end there, but she's going to host most of the class today. First, we're going to talk about your assignment from last week, and then we will talk about the assignment for this week, and then we'll speak on farm to table. So, Chef, what do you have to say about JAM?
So I saw a lot of wonderful JAM this week. In almost every narrative that I read, you guys mentioned that it came together quicker than you anticipated. It really wasn't very challenging, and that's absolutely true. It's a pretty simple product, but something that I have also explained to you guys, you'll hear it in your feedback for sure, is that because it's sort of simple like that, it can be so profitable. Jam can be such a profitable product. It can be really versatile. It has a ton of different uses in the kitchen and the bakery, filling danishes, donuts, pastries, layering cakes with it, flavoring creams with it. So it's actually a really, really useful skill to have in your back pocket because it's also more cost effective typically to make your own. So for all of those reasons and more, having the skills to make your own jam, and for those of you who took it a step farther this week and did the actual process of canning, those are definitely skills that are going to make you money. We're going to talk more about it. We have someone joining us who's going to tell you all about making money with jam, but overall, super strong work. The thing I want to highlight this week, what I'm going to post in our class cafe by the end of the week, are a few pictures of people who gave me beautiful plated presentations for their jam. I was so excited by it because you'd think to yourself, like, how are you going to present jam? I saw some pictures that were simple but still beautiful, maybe just a piece of toast with that jam spread on it next to the little container of jam. That was beautiful. And then I saw people who took it really above and beyond, who sliced apples in half and filled the apple with their jam, topped it with other garnishes. I saw some really cool presentations. So I want that from you guys each week. I've seen so many of your faces. I've seen some of your incredible work. You guys have already set the bar high for yourselves. So every week, no matter the product, whether it's as simple as jam or something as complicated as our dessert trio that we're going to do at the end of the block, I really want you to consider your plated presentations. Remember that every single week is an opportunity to update your portfolios with pictures that you're really proud of. So that's what we've got for last week. Does anybody have any questions about their jam from last week? No? No questions? Any comments? Did anybody make a really cool flavor that they want to talk about? I definitely saw a few interesting flavors of jam. Somebody made a carrot cake flavored jam, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah.
Oh, what was that all about? I want to know about that one.
They cooked down their carrots with their other most of the spices that you would find in a carrot cake. Cooked those down with their corn syrup and sugar, so it was still a jam consistency, spreadable, but with all the flavors of a carrot cake.
That sounds awesome. That would be good to use in the deconstructed dessert, I think, in week 10.
I also saw some people just use other fun ingredients, like adding jalapeno to their apple jam, gives it a kick, makes the flavor a bit more interesting, incorporates more local produce. So I did see some definite creativity with your jams this week.
That's awesome. Yeah, I fielded a lot of questions over the weekend about, about the jam making process and what types of fruits and vegetables you can use. But again, with this type of thing, the sky's the limit. There's so many things that you can make jam out of. It doesn't just have to be, an apple or a berry or anything like that. Lots of creativity. And just like Chef said before, there's many applications for jam. So knowing how to do this is definitely one of the fundamentals of being a pastry cook or a pastry chef. When I make jam, I don't usually spread the jam on toast professionally. I make jam to use in desserts. You can fold it into whipped cream when you're making a mousse. You can actually fold it into cake batter. You can put it in your icing to flavor your icing. You can spread it on things. You can put it in tart shells. You can put it in a piping bag and fill things. Like you could squirt a little bit into an eclair before you put the custard in. Like strawberry jam and chocolate mousse in an eclair. You know, you got a chocolate dipped strawberry eclair. So many different ways to make jam, in addition to just selling it. You know, if you want to put it in cans and sell it at the farmers market, we have a lady in a video speaking about that today. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use it, a lot of different ways to make it. I know that our formula didn't call for pectin, but if you want to research different formulas for jam that use pectin, I would suggest looking into that in the future as well.
Jam is something, too, that you can utilize. One of the main reasons that I find myself making jam at work is because I have fruit that's about to go bad. If I have fruit that's like on the verge of maybe in another day or two, it's not going to be good anymore, I whip up some jam. Because then, boom, you just made that produce shelf life that much longer, which saves you money in the long run, right? So jam is really one of those products that you can utilize sort of scraps. Let's say you have some raspberries left over and some strawberries and some blueberries, make a mixed berry jam. And then you've got a little bit more product. You've stretched that produce that much farther.
Yeah, that's good to point out, is like the food cost aspect of it, because maybe you have a little bit of scrap fruit and you don't think that, okay, maybe my fruit costs $20 and this amount of scraps only amounts to like $1.25 or something. But what you can do with that scrap, maybe you turn it into $15. So you just had in $1.25 of waste. Now you've created actual, you know, you've recovered the waste portion of the cost and you've created profit out of it too. So that's good to know. And you can also take the scraps from the culinary kitchen too. If you work in like a restaurant, or you work in a banquet hall or some sort of a gourmet market where they have culinary people, pop into the kitchen and be like, yo, I want to get your leftover pepper scraps and whatever. And you can do stuff with it to cross utilize it in the pastry department to make yourself even more money as well. So that's a good point. Anybody have anything to say about that assignment before we move on?
I do.
All right.
I noticed that, like, I did strawberry jam myself, and so I noticed that, like, the strawberries had a lot more water content to it, so it took a lot longer than 20 minutes. It took, like, probably about 30 minutes to make it cook off, like, to where it's actually thick enough to take off the stove. Is that normal for that kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. And I was going to say, it's good to think about that, you know, when you're creating these formulas, that it's kind of like you have to take an educated guess as far as the cooking time. You don't want to just look at a formula and say, okay, it says it takes 20 minutes, so it's going to take 20 minutes. Maybe it's got more water activity in the fruit. Maybe it's got less water activity. You know, that's something that it's good to use your education, you know, use your brain, use your thinking power to review the formula and say, okay, well, this looks really wet. It's probably going to take more time, instead of just relying on what's written there. That's something we definitely do as chefs, is assess a recipe or formula and, you know, think about the actual ins and outs of what it's going to take to create it successfully.
No matter what the recipe is, no matter if it's jam, a complicated cake, there are so many variables that can affect how long it takes to cook or bake. For example, with your jam, the thickness of your pot. I have some really, really cheapo pots that I've had for years, and they're super thin. So water boils really quickly in them. They're not great equipment, but they do work well for that sort of thing. Versus my stainless steel pots that are much thicker. It takes a lot longer for that heat to transfer through, but they're much higher quality. If I'm using one pan versus the other, it can add 5 minutes, 10 minutes to my production. The type of stovetop that you have, if you have an electric stovetop versus a gas stovetop, the altitude that you live at, the humidity of your kitchen. There are truly so many variables that can affect the cook time and bake time. So learning visual indicators that you should also be looking for is going to help you a ton. This week for your jam, I talked about 2 different visual indicators. One is the speed of the bubbles that are boiling. So in the beginning stages of that jam, those bubbles are small, moving rapidly to the top. As it thickens, those bubbles get much larger, take longer to get to the surface. The other is the way that your fruit looks in the liquid. So in the beginning, it looks like your fruit is floating in that watery liquid. And by the end, it should look like your fruit is coated in syrup. So those are a few things that you can look for outside of just watching the time to help you decide when your jam's ready to come off the stovetop.
Yvonne has a question.
Yeah, sorry, I just signed in about 6 minutes late, but I just had a quick question. If I wasn't putting my jam in a jar, did I have to use the pectin, or I should have used it with just putting it in a container in the refrigerator?
There was no pectin in the formula that we gave you,
Right.
so you didn't have to use that. But the pectin it's not to make it last in the jar. It's not part of the canning process. The pectin is a thickener.
Okay.
So whether you're canning it or jarring it or putting it in Tupperware and storing it in your refrigerator, the pectin is there for the actual jam itself to make it, to give it the texture that it's supposed to be at the end. Pectin is usually present in jams that are utilizing fruits and vegetables that don't have a lot of natural pectin, or maybe you're utilizing fruits and vegetables that are past their prime. They're a little bit ripe or overripe, and they've lost that a lot of their natural pectin during the ripening process, because as the cell walls break down, they lose their natural pectin. So you would add more to the jam in order to make it thick the way it's supposed to be, but it's not for the canning process itself.
Okay, thank you, because I bought some, but since I didn't see it in the formula, I didn't use it. But in some of the recipes I've seen, they had the pectin with the canning. So I just wanted to make sure that I didn't need to use it.
Yeah, no, you didn't need to use it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions or comments about jam before we move on? No? Before we talk about our next assignment, I just wanted to talk about attendance for a couple minutes. We do reach out to students who have not been active in class for 7 or more days. The cutoff is 14 days before you're withdrawn from the program, and that's just a policy that comes from the Department of Education. It's not a policy that comes from our school, it comes from the actual government. But once you hit 7 days of no attendance, we start emailing you and messaging you, calling you and texting you. So if you do get those calls from us, don't be disturbed by that. Just know that you need to go ahead and log in and post attendance. And you can do that by submitting an assignment, watching a live session, watching the current live session archive, taking a quiz, posting in the discussion forum if there is one that week. But I just mentioned this because last week and the week before, I was emailing students. You know, I've got 270 students. I was emailing many people about their attendance, and I got a lot of very confused messages in reply. But there's nothing to be confused about. If you're not posting attendance for 7 or more days, you're going to hear from one of the staff, or more than one of the staff, because we really want you to make attendance before 14 days when you get withdrawn. So that's as simple as that. Does anybody have a question about that at all? I know that you're all familiar with the attendance policy. I just had to say that because of the messages I received. Some people sounded confused about why I was trying to contact them about their attendance. Okay. So I'm going to screen share with you a couple new feature on the class page. If you're looking at the class page, right up at the top, there's this button called Class Announcements. It's similar to the Class Cafe, but this is a feature that Chef Genevieve and I can use to send you messages without actually using the message feature. Okay, so we can go in here and we can type messages to you. You're going to get notifications that we've added these messages, and you can also look at the messages directly on this page too. So if you log into the class page, you can click that button and you can, you know, see whatever but you can't type messages in there. If you want to type messages to each other, to your, your classmates, you can go in the class cafe area, or as usual, if you want to contact us directly, you can do that. So I just wanted to point that out as a new feature this week on the class page. So we are in week 2, and today we're going to be talking about farm to table and reducing your carbon footprint. You do have a discussion this week, and I will point out that I put some requirements down here for the discussion. The reason why I made this requirement is because the discussion is worth 15% of your grade. So just going in there for 5 minutes and typing a couple sentences isn't really good enough. I'm not requiring you to do a lot, okay? It's 5 sentences at least for your initial post, thoroughly answering the question that was asked of you, and 3 to 4 sentences for each reply. Now, I did mention down here that if the post that you're replying to doesn't inspire you to write 3 to 4 sentences, then pick a new post to reply to. I know I get a lot of questions on that, that I wasn't able to write 3 to 4 sentences because there just wasn't, I wasn't interested in what I was responding to. Well, pick one that does interest you then. And you need to do more than just agreeing with the person. You can't be like, hey, Katie, I agree with what you said, way to go. That's not an appropriate response, and that's not going to get you the points, okay? You're given 8 full points for the initial post if you did it correctly, and you're given 2 points or 6 points for the initial post and 2 points each for the replies. So I want to be able to award you the full 10 points. So make sure that you're looking at those requirements and you're actually following the directions there. The discussion itself, the question is, what does farm to table mean to you? And how have you tried to reduce your carbon footprint? Basically, if not, why haven't you done that? And if you don't know anything about what this means right here, you will after our discussion today, okay? But I just wanted to point out the requirements. If you find that after you do this discussion, you're missing points and you're asking me why, it's most likely because you didn't follow the requirements that I'm giving you. And I know that it's different than in the past. I don't know what kind of standards you've been held to for the discussion post, but I'm not asking for a lot. I'm just asking for a little bit more thoroughness in your discussions, if that makes sense. Anyone have a question about that or a concern, comment? It's not really a lot. It's 5 sentences for your initial post, 3 to 4 for each reply. Not a huge deal. Okay. Is Chef Genevieve still here? She gone? Where'd she go? Okay. Well,
I don't see her.
let me see if I got a message from her. Oh. Sorry about that. Okay, well, we will move on then, and we'll start talking about farm to table and reducing your carbon footprint. Okay, I'm going to talk about greenhouse gases and reducing your carbon footprint. Who can tell me what that means? What is a carbon footprint and what are greenhouse gases?
Pollution?
Yes, greenhouse gases are pollution. What about the carbon footprint?
Carbon footprint is basically your what you contribute to. It's like all the gases in the air and stuff and the pollution. It's what you contribute to the pollution in the air, basically.
Right, that's exactly right. Your carbon footprint is your contribution to the amount of pollution that's going into the atmosphere. And there's different ways that this can happen. It could happen from driving your car too much, which is emitting a lot of gases. What kind of gas comes out of the back of your car? Carbon monoxide. Okay, so that's definitely a pollutant. Carbon monoxide is not really a gas that the plant life on this planet can filter out. The plants want to filter out carbon dioxide, which is a natural gas, but carbon monoxide is not, from internal combustion engines, is not necessarily something that the plant life can filter for us. So every time somebody drives a car or a bus or a train or anything, that's contributing to the greenhouse gases. You can increase your carbon footprint by using too much water, by using too much electricity, by generating a ton of trash every day. Like if you're one of those people who fills up their trash can on a daily basis, it's just going into a dump and it's rotting. What happens when the trash rots? What comes out of the trash when it's decomposing? Anybody know? Methane. Methane is the gas that comes out of decomposing foods like meats and fruits and vegetables. And that is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases is the methane. And methane also comes from animals that are, livestock. It's the gas that animals expel out their back end. But so the meat industry is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases too. What else? What other kind of ways do you think that we leave a carbon footprint?
By cooking on your stove, leaving your lights on when you don't need to.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah, if you're cooking, you're using natural gas or you're using electricity. Maybe it's coming from your oven. Sorry. Go ahead.
Even like leaving your phone chargers plugged in the walls when you're not charging your phones and stuff like that, that also contributes.
Yeah, anytime that there's a plug in the wall, even if the appliance is not on, it's generating an electric current. So even if your TV is not actually in the on position, it's still generating an electric current and utilizing electricity. So it's kind of unreasonable to say that we're going to unplug all of our appliances on a daily basis. But if you are interested in reducing your carbon footprint and you're interested in reducing your electric bill, that is definitely one of the things you can do is unplugging your appliances. Okay. So I have a slideshow that I'm going to pull up and show you here, and we can talk more about the carbon footprint in just a second.
While she's pulling that up, can you guys start listing off either out loud or in the chat ways that how to reduce your carbon footprint? So this is a speech that I always give when it comes to helping the environment. There is literally nothing too small. You should be proud of everything that you do, every small thing, no matter how small, that is making an effort to lower your carbon footprint. So for example, if you use reusable grocery bags instead of getting new plastic bags every time you go to the grocery store, right? There are even things in your own home. For example, my piping bags, I have plastic piping bags, but I wash them. So I reuse them as many times as I can before I throw them away. So there are tons of things that you can do, no matter how small. And I have lived in areas where people made me feel like I wasn't doing enough. And I just want to emphasize that that's totally silly. Anything that you are able to do to help save the planet a little bit, even if it's something as simple as remembering to turn off your lights before you leave for work, that's awesome. It's wonderful. Don't let anybody make you feel otherwise. Anything that we can do together cumulatively is going to help us reduce our carbon footprint.
That's true. Baby steps. Every little bit helps. Stacy pointed out that she's outlawed plastic wrap and baggies in her house, which is a great thing to do. We're just using Tupperware instead, which is reusable. Okay, so that's a great idea right there. The slideshow, I'm going to talk about this topic, and then we will discuss what your assignment is this week, and then Chef Genevieve will talk about the farm to table concept. So what we just described as a carbon footprint is your contribution to to the pollution of the environment in a nutshell. So you've got the emissions of carbon dioxide. You've also got the emissions of carbon monoxide from, cars and vehicles. Methane, of course. So these are all with electricity, using too much water, generating too much garbage, okay? So that's basically what your carbon footprint is in a nutshell. Greenhouse gases. This is something that a lot of people don't understand, but those are the pollutants that we just talked about, the methane, the carbon dioxide, and the carbon monoxide that are getting trapped in the environment. And the problem with that is that they're not able to escape through the atmosphere. They're not able to be filtered out sufficiently by the plant life on this earth. And what's happening is they're trapping sunlight rays. They're trapping the UV rays from the sun, which is causing the planet to heat up. Now, I know that's a controversial topic, and we don't want to talk about it politically today. We're just talking about it a little bit more scientifically, even though we're not scientists. That's what greenhouse gases are. They are trapped in the environment. They don't allow the sun rays, the UV rays, to escape the way they would normally bounce off the surface of the earth and leave. They're getting trapped in our atmosphere, and it's causing the temperature of the planet to heat up more and more. So some of the biggest emissions here on this chart, we've got electricity. Agriculture, that's the release of the methane. There's all kinds of gases that are released from industry, even like nuclear waste as well. Transportation is a huge one as well. Using too much water, food waste, the energy that it takes to supply buildings with their light and their natural gas and all those types of things. Those are the big contributors to greenhouse gases. So here's a visual of what I was just describing to you. The sun is supposed to bounce off the earth, and the solar radiation is supposed to go away. But when the greenhouse gases get trapped in our atmosphere, the solar radiation stays inside and it bounces back and forth, and that is what's causing the earth to heat up more than it should be. Okay, it causes changes in the annual temperature, and you might not notice that drastically. But if you look at the history of the temperature changes on the Earth, you'll notice that over the 7 billion years the Earth has been around, of course, we've gone through ice ages, we've gone through stone ages, we've gone through all different types of climate changes. But only in the past couple hundred years, since we've started the Industrial Revolution, have we seen these huge changes in climate. And I don't know any other way to describe it other than, the pollution from our industry and from us moving forward in our civilization. But there's ways that we can at least alleviate that a little bit. So yeah, it's all our fault. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to talk about it politically, but we're responsible for the industry. Humans are responsible for creating the emissions that are happening. So we have to be the ones to try to help back off on it. These are the countries right here that are at most responsible. You can see that the big one right here is China. China is the biggest contributor. This is the rest of the world that's not listed. Hundreds of other countries, but this one is China. This one is United States. You got India, Russia, Japan, Germany, Mexico. Okay, so you can see that we, in addition to China, are the largest contributors of the greenhouse gases. So here's a list of ways you can reduce your carbon footprint to alleviate the pollution that's causing our poor Earth to suffer. Reduce your waste. Okay, so keep it on top of how much garbage you're going through each week. Like I know that I try not to put out more than 2 bags in my trash can each week. Try not to use too much disposable packaging, like we just talked about a few minutes ago, plastic wrap and baggies. You want to use reusable types of things. What we're going to talk about in just a minute is buying local. buying food from local distributors, which cuts down on the transportation, which will cut down on the emissions of carbon monoxide contributing to greenhouse gases. Same thing goes for driving less, unplugging your appliances in your home to use less electricity. You can use renewable energy, which of course would be solar, especially, and wind power too, if you can harness that, but most people put solar panels on their homes. Try to be energy efficient, use energy efficient appliances, only turn on the lights and the heater and the AC when you really need to. You can plant a garden. Planting a garden, you can grow your own fruits and vegetables, and you're also planting more vegetation, which helps filter the greenhouse gases as well. That's one of the reasons why we have such a big problem on this earth with greenhouse gases, is because of the forest industry removing so many of the trees that the earth is not able to filter out all those emissions. Visiting thrift stores, reuse things, reuse household goods and clothing. Living in a small home will help you be more energy efficient, that you're not trying to heat 3,000 square feet. Maybe you live in a 15,000 or 1,500 square foot home. Purchase low carbon goods. I'm going to read that to you because it's hard for you to see, I think. Many brands are taking steps to reduce their carbon footprint of their supply chains and products. These include Patagonia, Kula, Prada. I don't think that says Prada, among others. Anyway, you want to purchase from companies who are aware of the pollution problem and who are taking steps to try to solve that.
On that same token, something that happens in the fashion industry that I only recently learned in the past couple of years is that some brands at the end of a season burn all of the clothes that they didn't sell. They burn them because they don't want to sell them at a lower cost. They don't want that to affect their brand name as a whole. And that makes me like sick to my stomach. It makes me so sad. So being aware too of just in general who you're purchasing from, more about the brands, both of things like clothes and kitchen goods, but also your food. And that's what we're going to dive a little bit more into today, knowing a little bit more about where your food comes from and what options are available to you in your area.
Yeah. Awesome. So before we talk about that, let's just talk about our assignment briefly. Your week 2 assignment, create a fruit dessert, cookie, or bar with local products. For this assignment, you'll be required to create a baked fruit dessert with at least one locally sourced product. You may choose the item that you make. It can be any fruit dessert. It doesn't necessarily have to be a fruit dessert. You could use something else. It doesn't have to be fruit. Pumpkin, since that's in season. Locally grown or produced means that the item comes from a nearby place, a nearby farm or dairy. You can use eggs from your own backyard chicken coop if you have one. You can use honey from the local hive, apples from your grandmother's apple tree, flour from a local artisan grain mill, pumpkins from the farmer's market. You need one locally sourced item. Your whole recipe does not have to be locally sourced. You just need one at least, okay? So as usual, you need your self-ID, your sanitizer, your mise en place. We need a picture to identify the locally sourced items. So let's say you're using a jar of plum preserves that comes from 2 towns away and you bought it at the farmer's market. Take a picture of the jar that lists the city that the product was made in, and then you could kind of like tell us in your narrative that like, I live in city A, this was produced in city C, which is 30 miles away. Just give us a little bit of an explanation from it. If it doesn't have a container, like if you're buying fruits and vegetables from a farmer's market, take a picture of the farmer's market, take a picture of the farmer. You know, we're just looking for a little bit more information about where you got this locally sourced product from and basically where it comes from. At least one photo of the major stages of your dessert preparation. We'd like to see all the stages. So let's say you're making a bar that requires the creaming method to make the crust, and then you can it's got a jam filling, so cook the jam and spread it in there. Then it's got a streusel topping. We want to see pictures of the process of creating this this product. Same way you would give us pictures of any other product that you're making. We just look. I don't go into detail here because I don't know what you're going to create, so I can't say what we want to see pictures of. Basically, we want to see pictures of the whole process of whatever you're making. Okay, we want to see it completed and presented. Try to be creative with your presentation. And then we want to see a piece of it. So break it apart, cut a slice out, take a scoop of whatever it is that you're making, and show us how it looks on the inside. We want to see that it was cooked or baked properly and what the crumb is, what the final texture of that product is. Somebody had a question. Somebody raised their hand. Maybe it was a mistake.
It was me.
Okay.
I made streusel a week ago, and I put it in my fridge in a Tupperware, the leftover. Can I use that for the top of my pie?
Sure.
I don't have any production photos of it, but I'll take a picture of it in the Tupperware.
Yeah, just make sure that you take as many pictures of the process as possible. So let's say like for example, you're making the bar I just described. Maybe you're going to utilize the jam you made last week, or utilize the jam you bought at the farmer's market and you don't have pictures of that. Take pictures of when you're making the crust or some, the part of it. So, but again, it can be anything you want it to be as long as it's some sort of a baked dessert and it's got one locally sourced product, right?
Remember too, I know that some of you live in areas, some of us are not fortunate enough to necessarily have farmers markets happening regularly, or maybe we're not particularly close to a farm, but I do encourage you when you're at the grocery store to ask more questions. So often in the grocery store, there will be at least a few produce items that are locally sourced, and usually the market attendants have more information that they can give you about where that produce came from. But there are also alternative objects. Chef Jeannie mentioned some of them earlier, like honey. Honey is something that you can often find locally made in your store. Jams are definitely something that you can see locally made. There's a bagel shop where I live where they sell a bunch of different jams and jellies. In Colorado, there's something called the Colorado Cottage Law. So basically anything that doesn't need to be refrigerated, you can pretty much sell on your own without having a business license. And so that's a huge part of where I live, is people using local produce, selling that produce. I live in peach country. Every summer is got my tongue tied there, peach picking season. And it is so huge here that it's a big part of our economy. If we did not have that local produce, and if people didn't support our farms here in Grand Junction in the Grand Valley, it would be a drastically different space. That summertime produce harvest funds some families here for the rest of the year until the following summer. So shopping farm to table, working locally in your community is a huge, huge part where I live. I know that's not the case for all of you, but the more you can learn about where you live, the more you can find out about what is available to you, the more you're going to be able to incorporate it into your business. Chef Jeannie, do you mind if I start the presentation?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So we've got this slideshow here. Oops. Is that full screen for you guys? Yes?
Yeah, that looks good.
So first of all, before I jump too deep into this, what do you guys think of when you think of farm to table? When you hear that phrase, what are some of the things that you think?
Going and getting goods that ain't been processed, have preservatives in them. You're just getting, you're going outside and picking it right off. Then you're fixing it right at, in your own kitchen.
Right. Fresh ingredients. That's definitely one of the huge main aspects of farm to table. Anybody else? One of the ways that I like to describe it is farmer to table. One of the huge benefits of farm to table is getting to know other small business owners, farmers, and food passionate people in your area. So that's a huge benefit to farm to table. When we jump into this, you can see, sort of just like Paula said, it's something that we've been doing for a long time. So long ago, that was just the way things were. All of our ingredients were fresh. Farm to table wasn't really a movement because all of our food was coming from the farm. Now that we have so many mass productions of things, it's a lot different. It's to the point where I would say it's a little bit rare, a little bit special to find people who really focus on using fresh ingredients, on restaurants that really focus on farm to table. It's getting more and more popular. Escoffier is a farm to table school. We try and do as much locally as we possibly can. We've got Alice Waters here, who in the 70s started a restaurant. She's accredited with being one of the front runners of the farm to table movement. So she was really passionate about using fresh, locally grown ingredients. She always talked about it not only adds freshness to your plate, but it adds care. She really emphasized that that was a big part of why she used fresh and local ingredients, because she felt like it made a massive difference in her food and in the environment of her restaurant. Looking at this slide here, we're talking about some pros of farm to table and of using fresh ingredients. For me, we do have some cons listed on this slideshow, so we'll dive into that. We'll make sure that we look at it from both sides, but fresh is always going to be better. If you have a fresh ingredient available to you, using that as opposed to something that's got those preservatives or additives in it is always the better option. If you have fresh available, you want to use fresh. Not only because it tastes better, but because it's got more nutrients in it. Once we've cooked down our food, once we've added other things to it like those preservatives, once we've even frozen it, we lose some of those nutrients. So to get the maximum amount of your food, using fresh when you can is the best option. I'm gonna move my little window here. So we're gonna dive into farmers markets more in a little bit in a later slide. But going back to our environmental impact and lowering our carbon footprint, this is something that's gotten worse and worse and worse as the food industry has changed. So we talk about a lot of things when we talk about farm to table, like GMOs and organic versus non-organic. All of those things are important, but it all boils down to what are we doing to the environment? How can we backtrack? How can we fix this a little bit? How can we pay more attention to what we are doing by trying to grow our food in this mass production way? We've got a little paragraph down here at the bottom that sort of just describes, the slideshow buttons are new for me, so I'm a little bit of a rookie at them. But an average 18-wheeler gets about 5 miles to the gallon of gas. So to move 1,500 miles would take 500 gallons of gas. How many 18-wheelers do you see on the highway every single day when you go to work? Probably at least 4 or 5, a handful. I know that I always do. So if you are able to shop local, if you're able to shop at your local farmers market, at your markets in town, directly from your farmers, you're going to lower your carbon footprint by less food needing to be transported to you. So even though we can't do that for everyone, for the whole world, we can't make every restaurant only use local ingredients. Like I said, some of you live in places where there is no other option to get certain ingredients other than to have them brought in. But again, just going back to finding the balance between the two, using fresh and local when you can. So here's just talking about some of the things we talked about earlier. Smaller scale, whether it's farms, kitchens, your own house, is going to help you create will help you lower your carbon footprint. So working with a smaller farm, they're going to use less energy, less processing, less packaging. Packaging is a huge part of waste on this planet. And I think that it's continually getting better and better. We are creating more and more reusable products, but this is definitely a huge part of the waste that we create, especially in the culinary industry. So investing in your local economy is going to help you lower your carbon footprint, but it's also going to help you find your place in your community. That's a big part of it for me. Again, going back to where I live in this community, we really have to work as a team in order for all of us to function and make the money that we need to and get the fruit out to where we need to. Truly, the entire valley sort of rallies together. It's one of my favorite parts about shopping locally is getting to meet other small business owners. Again, meeting other people who are passionate about food. It can absolutely help you start your own business to build these sorts of relationships with the other local culinarians in your area. Knowing more about your food, where it's coming from, is so, so important and can also help you make a really awesome sale. For example, I've worked in many restaurants, and when we have a dish that's made with local ingredients, those servers sell the heck out of it. They're like, this locally grown red onion was diced with our locally grown purple cauliflower, which was then sauteed with our fresh zucchini, which came from this farm. People love it. Customers eat it up. When they hear that you've got local fresh ingredients, they love it. They want more of it. Farmers markets are a great way to do that and to do it quickly, to meet a lot of different farmers in your area, to meet a lot of different vendors, small business owners. There's always typically a ton of variety. So all of those things are awesome reasons to shop farmers markets. On that same token, that means that sometimes they can be a little bit unpredictable. Sometimes a vendor that you normally shop at won't be there. Sometimes they won't always have the same ingredients that you're looking for. So you don't necessarily want to rely on a farmer's market for all of your inventory, but it can absolutely be helpful for creating seasonal dishes, as well as cultivating those relationships with those farmers in which you might be able to get a more regular and predictable order from them. That's the next thing we're going to talk about, CSAs. This is one of my favorite things about farmers and supporting local communities. So a CSA is sort of like a membership. You pay either weekly or monthly, maybe it's even longer than that, but there's a certain amount that you pay regularly. And then you get a box based on how much you pay. So let's say you pay the smallest amount. Your box might be a little bit smaller. You might get 10 or 12 items. Let's say you pay the largest amount that that farm offers. You might get 3 boxes full of fruits and veggies. One of the downsides to this is you don't get to pick what goes in your box. So it's sort of a free-for-all, sort of a mystery box every time that you get it. It's always going to be something that's seasonal. It's still fresh produce that's coming from a local farm. I think that they're really fun. It's something that I like to do in my own household, but isn't necessarily something that works really well for a restaurant. Now, if you're, again, doing something, just creating a seasonal menu item, you could absolutely utilize a CSA in that sort of area. One of the fun things about a CSA, I think, is that it brings more people to the farm if you want it to. So in Boulder, Colorado, there's a farm called the 63rd Street Farm. They have a big pizza oven outside, huge, beautiful little farm. And every week they do a pizza party, and all the people who pay for their CSA who come to get their box come to the pizza party. They eat, they enjoy, they mingle, then they take their box of veggies home. So they've not only turned it into a way to get their local produce out to their community, but they've turned it into an event that their community members really look forward to and enjoy going to every week. So this is something that might be available to you in your area that you've never heard of. So I encourage you to do some research about farms that are made close to you if this is an option that would be available to you. Most of the slideshow is about our carbon footprint that we just went to, but I want to go back to our farmers market slide and talk a little bit more about that. How many of you have visited a farmers market?
I have.
I have a small one.
What did you think when you were there?
I wish it was much bigger. Like the ones where I used to live up in Cincinnati called Finley Market. They have a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
Ours is so small. I mean, they maybe have 3 or 4 vendors and ain't much of a variety like the bigger ones do.
Even the small ones can be really useful and sometimes be easier to crack into. As far as getting your own booth, if you want to consider becoming a vendor, let's say you really loved making your jam last week and you want to learn more about selling your jam at a farmer's market, sometimes the small ones can be really effective and a great way to crack into it. There are some large ones that it can take years to get a vendor spot. Some of the bigger farmers markets out there now have waiting lists to become a vendor. So they definitely do vary in size. And of course, based on your region, vary in what's available to you. In California, they're going to have all sorts of different produce available than the farmers markets here in Colorado, right? Sheree says vendor booths are expensive. That's true too. It can be costly to be a part of a farmer's market. That's another reason why it can be helpful to cultivate relationships with those vendors there, because maybe splitting a booth with a vendor is something that could potentially be born out of getting to know a vendor. You know, there are definitely options and partnerships to be made. The bakery that I work for now, when we first started, we didn't have our own building. There was a pie shop. Again, we live in peach country, so we definitely have a few pie shops. There was a pie shop that had a big enough kitchen that they weren't filling the space. They weren't making their monthly rent. So we split that space with them. We took over the other half of the kitchen. We started baking our goods. They stuck to the pies. We baked everything else. And for at least a year, that was our partnership, and it worked really well for both businesses. It helped both businesses make enough money that we now have our own spaces separately that are running just fine. So building relationships with other small businesses in your area, and again, working as locally as you can, is really truly going to be so beneficial to you, especially if starting your own business where you live is something that you intend to do.
I am reading in the chat room here something about pop-up shops. I wanted to say that where I lived in Greensboro, I saw a lot of businesses making pop-up sales in the parking lots of shopping centers during the holidays. People who generally sold their food from their house, but they wanted to get a little bit more recognition, especially during the seasons when people are buying a lot of specialty baked products. Just for example, they would set up in the back end of a parking lot in like a busy shopping mall or something, so that people, when they were coming and going from the shopping center, could take a look at their cakes and pies and cookies during Thanksgiving and Christmas time. So I'm not sure if that's the type of pop-up you guys are talking about, but that was called pop-up in Greensboro, kind of popping up at random parts of the city just to sell on the sidewalks or whatever. But you do need licensing for that. In Greensboro, where I just moved from, it was free. You just had to apply for it at the city hall or wherever. But some other places might charge for it. Should we watch that video?
I think so. We have a video of one of our staff members here who sells sheet jars, creates, and has worked at a bunch of farmers markets. She makes jam. Jam's one of her main products. And it's a really great video, you guys, because she brings up a lot of the big challenges that you face when you're starting a small business, even something as small as a stand at the farmer's market. So I think that it's really informative and a really good example of what that looks like.
Yeah. This video is about, the portion we're going to play for you is about 10 minutes. So we're going to go over a little bit on time, but if you need to leave, feel free to leave. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us as usual. If you want to kind of chime in while the video is playing, you can do that too. Otherwise, I will go ahead and start the video. All right.
You know, and we'll get into farm to table a little more next week as far as our discussion goes. But it is a good way to kind of see how agriculture works, and getting to know the farmers, and what that really means is, you know, growing sustainably, eating locally. You know, this is a good assignment to start that conversation, or, you know, explore your area if you aren't already a farmer market person. You'll be surprised.
Hopefully you guys can hear me. I was invited today to participate because, of course, I work with Escoffier, and I'm one of the admissions advisors. However, I've been through the program, and I also had the luxury of getting the chance to go on the trip to France. And of course, when I went in France, I came across a jar of lemon jam you couldn't get here, and it inspired a gourmet jam and relish business. So I've now been out at the farmers markets for going on 4 years. You will find if you go out to the farmers markets, you will be approached by grocery stores and other types of businesses as well, because when you have a solid product, I've now had 8 grocery store contract offers. And the farmers market is a great way to be able to build your business when you've already have a brand out there. Because when you participate in the farmers market, my application to get into the farmers market was about a 9-page application and biography. And they expect you to have an IEN, which means that you are now paying taxes on your business. So it's a level that you get to. It's not necessarily always where everybody starts, because are you ready to pay taxes on your business and grow your business like that, where you've got customer after customer after customer? So when you're at that level where you feel like, okay, I'm ready to grow to that stage, what's really nice is that at the farmers market, when you fill out the application, if you need to talk to the health inspector, they connect you to them. So when you put in your application for the French market, all the markets in Illinois are connected, for example, and in your state, they're going to be that way too, where they're all connected, where you can go from once you're in the market system, you can set up for this market on Saturday and another market on Sunday. So they'll connect you to your health inspector. I've also discovered myself that there are many things, many different professional kitchens, including your VFW halls, your American Legion, your churches sometimes will have a professionally certified and inspected kitchen. So when they're looking for that health inspection certificate, if you are using a professional kitchen like a church kitchen or a VFW hall kitchen, they will have that certificate to provide directly to the farmers market. So that's a way, if you're ready and at that stage, fill out your application for the farmers market first. Don't be intimidated by all the questions that they ask. Just be honest about your business, and they'll contact you, approve you normally, and then they'll connect you to the health inspector. You should already, for the cottage food laws, you want to pay very close attention to like the fruits and stuff. So if you're doing jams, for me, I started with a certain amount of jams, and then I started renting a professional kitchen so I could offer more. Like I have a spicy bacon relish and some other things that go beyond the jam family as well as I've grown. And once you grow to that level, now you need to be in professional kitchen territory, which I found for me, I was able to afford because I had connections with the VFW because I was a Girl Scout troop leader for 4 years and threw candy for them. So there's different ways to use the cottage food laws to get started, but then that's a stepping stone for you. Next step is professional kitchen. And then, as I mentioned, those grocery stores will contact you. They'll approach you at the farmers market when they get to know you and develop partnerships with you. And I've had several, like I said, I've had 8 stores now approach me. And I don't have my pricing down yet where I've got enough of a profit margin to wholesale. I'm probably another year out from that, being 4 years in, but the profits are very good for me with my business. I normally am I started off making between 100 and 300 a day. Now I'm consistently making 300 to 500 per day. So on a weekend, it's not unheard of to make, $1,000. So pretty good money.
Pretty impressive.
Anyway, I just wanted to share my story.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming in, Diana. Are you still a single, owner employee, or do you have
I have my aunt, so on a good market weekend, he's making 10%. So it really helps a lot because he's very motivated, and it feels really good for him to go home to dad from our mom's weekend, and he's got $100 in his pocket. And he's been doing the markets with me for 3 years. He just had his 17th birthday on Monday, and it's a really good part-time job for him that he just does with mom on the weekends. It's wonderful family time. I have a magnetic chessboard that I pull out if the market's slow. I pull that out of my market bin, and it's whoever's turn. We have a really good time with what we do. It's brought our family together. I booked a market up the street from where my mother-in-law lives. She wants to talk about sports all day. We have nothing in common, but she supports my business, and she comes early in the morning and helps me set up and brings me coffee and brings me change. And it's been a really wonderful thing for our family. Our whole family's been involved, but it's fun. And I'm the main one who's selling it and making it. I've got all the recipes. My son has started helping me design the recipes, which is really nice. Even though he's talked for years about being an engineer, now he's been saying, I want to go into the family business. And he sees how much money I'm making.
I'm going to end the video there. But as you could hear from the video, it's not the first step in your business. Usually the application process is pretty long, depending on the size and the popularity of the farmers markets. Like here where I live in Clayton, if there's just a little random farmers market on the corner, occasionally that might be easier to get into. But some of the big ones, like in Raleigh, like the weekly one that they have on Saturday, probably take me forever to get in there. So you have to start your business first, whether or not you're working out of your home kitchen, if you have the cottage law availability to do that, or if you have a food license to work out of your house, or maybe you're working in an incubator kitchen. Generally, you have to start your business before you can get into the farmers markets, and you have to be at a point in your business where you have the capability to grow. Like if I'm just making cakes from my house and I make 6 cakes a year, but I want to grow my business, I'm not going to go pop up at the farmer's market to sell my cupcakes, because chances are I'm going to generate a bunch of business that I might not be able to handle, just from my house. So it is a step, just like the lady said in the video. It's a step, and it's probably not step number 1, but it is a great step to increase your sales, especially if you're trying to get like a storefront or just expand your business in general. It's a great way to get your name out there and to get some actual face-to-face time with the customers, so they can see who you are and what you do, especially if you're using local products. In my opinion, there's no point in going to work in a farmer's market to sell your items unless you're using products that are, for the most part, locally sourced. Yeah.
And like we talked about earlier, turning scraps into profit. So when we were sharing that space with that pie shop, one of the things that the owner of the pie shop also did was make jams and jellies and pickled different vegetables. And she just had like a small little bookshelf on the side of the shop where she sold those things. And every time we had a tourist come into the shop, they would come to get their slice of pie or their muffin or whatever it may be to sit and enjoy it. And then on the way out, they were like, you know what? Let's just get this little jar of salsa. Let's just grab this jar of jam so that we can take it home and share it with our family and tell them about this cute little pie shop that we went to. So boom, turning those scraps just by having them canned properly and in the shop for people to see is making her money. So it's, even if you don't do a company focused on just this, it's still something that you can continue to utilize in the future.
Anybody have any questions or anything before we go? Yvonne has her hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted to touch on the topic when she was talking about the CSAs. Mm-hmm. We have one here in Charlotte that just opened that's based in Maryland called the Hungry Harvest. And they do locally grown fruits and vegetables that are, maybe not the right shape or size or stuff like that. And they sell them at a discounted price. But they also deliver them to your house each month. So I just wanted to tell everybody about that, unless in the state that you're in, you have a Hungry Harvest that can help you. And it's fairly inexpensive also.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's becoming really trendy for companies to sell their ugly produce. Everybody wants to buy the bright, shiny, round apples. They don't want the ones that look like feet, even though the feet-shaped apples taste just as good as the round ones. Anybody else? Lindsay?
Yes, for our assignment this week, are we able to do something that we've done before? Like, for instance, if I wanted to do a tart, could I do a tart?
Yeah, I mean, you can do whatever you like as long as you're utilizing one locally sourced item.
Okay, cool.
I would just say, you know, on that, try to be learning something new. You know, if it's something that you've made before, maybe change it up a little bit. Just so you're not, you know, that's the purpose of, you know, the school is, you know, to learn. Every week we want to be learning something new. So just make sure that whatever you're doing, even if it's a repeat from the past, that you're using it as a learning experience in one way or another. Maybe decorate the tart differently, or, you know, make the crust slightly, I don't know. I don't know what you're planning to do, but you use it as a learning experience.
It wouldn't be the same exact thing, but yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And one last good question from the chat, Chef, is there a substitution for high ratio liquid shortening in a cake recipe?
That is a good question. We have high ratio plastic shortening. Shortening comes in plastic and liquid. Plastic is the solid version of the shortening. So yes, you can substitute high ratio liquid shortening for high ratio plastic shortening, but knowing that the liquid shortening has more moisture in it than the plastic, so you may have to add some more liquid to the actual recipe. But as far as utilizing a substitution that you cannot buy commercially, like you can't find these things in the grocery store, high ratio shortenings, there's no substitution for them. High ratio shortening, whether it's plastic or liquid, is not the same as Crisco. Crisco is an all-purpose shortening. The reason, the idea behind high ratio shortenings is that when they emulsify into your product, they allow the absorption of higher ratios of both sugar and liquid. This is something that we're talking about in our cake class today, incidentally, but there's no substitution for high ratio shortening. If there's a recipe that calls for high ratio shortening, you can try using a different type of fat, but it's not going to turn out the same because, like I said, all-purpose shortening and high ratio are two different things. What can we get in the store to have a high ratio shortening? I've never seen one sold in local grocery stores. I've never seen it. You can order it. You can order it on Amazon, but I've actually never seen it sold in the supermarket. Usually it's a commercial type of thing. Like in our cake class this week, we are doing a 2-stage method cake, which in the industry you would generally use high ratio shortenings, but we're just using regular Crisco. The cake turns out just fine. So you can use other types of fat, but just technically they are not the same thing and they are not interchangeable. Especially when you're trying to do other things with it, like make pie crust and cookies and things of that nature. You have to realize that they are two different products. Shortening is not the same across the board. Anything else? Alrighty. Well, I'm going to say goodbye, and as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and don't forget about the class cafe. You can be sharing photos with each other and talking to your classmates about things too.
Chicken nuggets were local.
Chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hungry. All right, well, you guys have a great day, and we will see you next week. Good luck on your assignment. Bye-bye.